Some people believe that faith is weak, that religion is merely an emotional refuge for those who can't handle the pressures of the real world. But what if I told you that one of the greatest symbols of courage in history was an elite soldier who chose death rather than deny his faith? We're not talking about a distant legend or a symbolic tale. This is the true story of a man who faced the greatest empire on earth with nothing but conviction, silence, and resilience. And most impressively, he survived the impossible, only to return and face again those who tried to kill him. Madness? No. Purpose. A faith so alive that not even death could silence it. Saint Sebastian was not just a martyr. He was a spiritual strategist, a good-natured infiltrator, a commander who used his military influence to protect innocents and inspire a quiet revolution. And what he experienced, even centuries ago, carries urgent lessons for our time. In a world where people give up for much less, where courage has become the exception, knowing the story is like experiencing a shock of reality and hope at the same time. Because deep down, maybe you've also experienced invisible arrows, betrayals, pain, diagnoses, losses, and now you need a reason to keep standing. So stay with me until the end, because you'll not only understand why Saint Sebastian is considered the saint of arrows, but you'll also discover what this has to do with your life. And look, maybe this story won't just change your perspective on faith. It might change your way of life. And when that happens, no arrow can bring you down. Amidst the clash of swords and shouts of imperial orders, there was a man who walked in silence, but carried within him a thunder of faith. Saint Sebastian was the kind of person who understood the weight of mission, even if it was invisible to human eyes. While his companions saw only a fearless soldier, heaven beheld a faithful servant, willing to pay any price for his loyalty to Christ. He didn't use words to impose himself. He acted behind the scenes, with gestures that screamed love, courage, and truth. He's like that employee who, without anyone noticing, slowly saved the team from the chaos behind the scenes. Sometimes the greatest strength lies not in shouting, but in the silent firmness of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. Sebastian entered prisons like someone crossing a minefield, alert, strategic, driven by a sense of urgency that only those with purpose understand. He wasn't just another soldier among many. He was a link between heaven and earth. He visited imprisoned Christians, bringing them comfort, telling them with his gaze that their suffering was not in vain. And that kind of presence changes everything. If you know someone struggling today, a simple visit or a message can do what Sebastian did. Rekindle the flame in the heart of someone who's almost gone out. It's no exaggeration to say he was an infiltrator of good, an agent of faith, disguised as a Roman commander, in a Rome that tried to suffocate any seed of the gospel. But do you know what's most fascinating? Realizing he chose to be there. He wasn't pushed by circumstances. He was driven by conviction. And that changes everything. Because when you do something by choice, even knowing the risks, you activate a force the world can't control. And it was precisely this force that began to trouble the empire. And when the light is too much of a nuisance, the darkness always tries to extinguish it. The empire roars when challenged. And when Diocletian discovered that the one he trusted was, in fact, a follower of Christ, the mass of admiration turned to fury. The emperor felt betrayed, as if Sebastian's loyalty had been a personal affront. But the truth is that those who are offended by the light are often those who live in darkness. And then came the sentence, to transform him into a living warning. It wasn't enough to kill, it was necessary to humiliate. He was tied to a tree trunk and handed over to the archers, as if his faith could be pierced by arrows. The detail? No arrow pierces the spirit of one who is at peace. The scene is so symbolic, it seems straight out of a movie, but it was real. Each arrow that pierced Sebastian's body was like a desperate attempt to silence what he represented. And yet, he didn't scream. He didn't curse. He didn't complain. He simply remained, still, firm, almost serene. Sometimes, true power lies precisely in silence. The kind of silence that disarms even the cruelest of executioners. And this kind of posture teaches something profound. Noise doesn't always convince, but the steadfastness of the soul, that teaches without saying a single word. It's like when you see someone being offended and, instead of retaliating, you respond with dignity. The impact is much greater. And when they left him there, believing they had eliminated him, they made one of the greatest mistakes in history. Because faith isn't extinguished by pain, it ignites. And while the empire celebrated a false victory, heaven prepared a turnaround no one expected. Because when the world tries to bury someone with purpose, it is only, unknowingly, setting the stage for a miracle. We tend to think of a miracle as something grand, full of heavenly lights and sounds, but sometimes it arrives quietly through the hands of an ordinary woman, guided by an uncommon faith. Irene, this courageous Christian, finds Saint Sebastian's arrow-riddled body and refuses to accept its end. She sees there what no one else could. Life, and life, even wounded, is a seed. She cares for him in secret, with simple cloths, fervent prayers, and a faith unshaken by exposed wounds. Because deep down, she understood that saving a life like this was more than an act of compassion. It was a direct message to history. As the body healed, something deeper happened. Sebastian's soul was renewed. He didn't leave more cautious. He left more determined. He had survived death, and that carried a weight, a calling. Because, let's face it, if you survive what should kill you, maybe it's because there's still something only you can do. And this is where the story becomes a practical lesson. How many times have you gone through something that seemed like the end? What if, instead of stopping, you saw it as a divine push to go further? Read stories of overcoming. Study people who transform trauma into purpose, like Viktor Frankl in Man's Search for Meaning. It changes everything. Sebastian understood it wasn't time to run away. It was time to return. And this changes the logic of those who live to protect themselves. He could have disappeared, gone into hiding, started a new life. But he returned. He returned with visible scars, with painful memories, and yet he returned. Because when purpose is greater than fear, pain becomes fuel. And it was with this new fire in his heart that he rose. But what he did next wasn't just daring. It was one of the most dangerous and inspiring decisions of his life. It's difficult to understand with human logic. Why would someone return to the same place where they almost lost their life? But Saint Sebastian wasn't acting on ordinary logic. He was following a voice that screamed within him, an urgency that only those touched by something greater understand. Returning to the emperor wasn't about revenge. It was about a mission. He had something to say, a denunciation to make, and he wouldn't remain silent just because fear lurked. He looked into the eyes of the one who ordered his death and, with an almost supernatural boldness, exposed the injustices committed against Christians. This wasn't just courage. It was a full awareness of his purpose. But most impressive is that he didn't return just to confront the empire. He returned to serve. While many would have hidden, he ran into the Christian community and became its support, its solace, its foundation. He organized secret meetings, lifted up those who had fallen, and soothed desperate hearts. He knew he might have little time, but he also knew that this little could mean a lot. And here's the example. When you're in crisis, instead of isolating yourself, serve. Help someone. Lead a prayer group. Help a local NGO. Volunteer your time. Serving under pressure is one of the greatest antidotes to despair. This phase of Sebastian's life shows how revolutionary a well-lived faith can be. He didn't wear a cape, but he acted like a true hero. And the curious thing is that just when he was at his spiritual peak, when he was doing the most for others, the empire decided to act again, as if to say, there's no turning back now. But even so, Sebastian remained steadfast, because when the heart is filled with purpose, the body can be defeated, but the mission, no one can stop that. And what was to come, though brutal, would definitively seal the impact of his life. When a voice cannot be silenced by pain, one tries to do so by brute force. And that's exactly what the empire did. This time, no ceremony, no arrows, no symbolism. Just blunt blows, raw cruelty, cowardly brutality. Sebastian was beaten to death, without an audience, without trial, without a chance to defend himself. His body, once held up as a shield for others, was now thrown like garbage into a city sewer. But what the empire didn't understand is that when you try to bury someone full of purpose, the earth doesn't cover them. It multiplies them. And what was meant to be oblivion became the root of eternity. And that's where another courageous woman comes in. A simple Christian, but driven by profound respect. Upon finding Sebastian's body, she didn't just see a corpse. She saw a symbol, and she decided to give him a dignified burial in a place where faith could flourish amidst the ruins of injustice. This in itself is a powerful message. Honoring those who came before us is planting the future. Want a practical example? Remember those who came before you. Visit the tomb of someone in your family. Read the stories of martyrs of faith. Preserve traditions that carry values. Respect for the past is the fertilizer of purpose. And there, in that simple act, the seed of devotion was sown. Sebastian's tomb became a meeting place, a refuge of faith, a space for miracles. And the most beautiful thing is that this transformation began with a gesture of compassion. An ordinary person with a courageous attitude was instrumental in ensuring that a story would never be forgotten. This makes us wonder, have we done our part to keep alive the memory of the giants who paved the way for us? Because sometimes all it takes for a legacy to flourish is someone willing to care for the seed. There are stories that time tries to erase, but the courage that built them insists on keeping them alive. Saint Sebastian was remembered not only for surviving the arrows or defying the empire, but for being faithful to the end. His steadfastness is the kind of thing we feel, even without understanding everything at first. It's like that person who, even in silence, inspires simply by the way they live. And the most remarkable thing is that his story has spanned centuries like a well-aimed arrow, striking the hearts of those who need to remember that faith isn't just about believing. It's about deciding to continue when everything else tells you to stop. Today, he is invoked as a protector against disease, plagues, and epidemics. And it's no coincidence. The same courage that led him to face death has become a symbol of resilience for those fighting for life. In various regions of the world, his name echoes in prayers, promises, and popular festivals, sometimes even by those who don't know his entire story. But now you do. And knowing this transforms everything. Because carrying the image of Saint Sebastian on your chest, after understanding his journey, is also carrying an invitation to be someone who chooses faith even in difficult times. And that, my friend, changes the way we face any storm. Sebastian didn't live for himself. He lived to encourage. His faith was like a lit torch, passed from hand to hand, warming hearts nearly frozen by fear. And this is the most instructive part. Having faith is enough. You have to spread it. You can do this today. Call someone who's feeling discouraged. Write a note of hope. Post a word of encouragement online. Being a living arrow, as he was, means refusing to live on autopilot. Because in the end, what will make your story resonate like his is not how much you believed, but how much your faith transformed the lives of those around you. Now tell me, after all this, what will you choose? Will you continue living on autopilot, or will you decide to be like Saint Sebastian, someone who doesn't hide behind fear, but transforms even life's blows into purpose? Because what this man experienced wasn't just meant to become history. It was meant to become a mirror. And if your faith isn't driving you to rise, to serve, to inspire, perhaps it's time to rekindle that flame. Life will continue to launch arrows, that's for sure. But what about you? Will you be a target, or will you be a living arrow, guided by a greater purpose? Think about it. What have you been doing with the faith you've received? Are you waiting for a miracle to fall from the sky? Or are you becoming a part of it in someone's life? True faith is practical. It is action. It is movement. It's in the hug you give when no one else will. It's in the encouraging words you give when everyone else is criticizing. It's in the way you lead your home, your team, your group of friends. So I ask you with all sincerity, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? One that ends with you, or one that continues in those who listen? If this awakens something deep inside you, comment below what touched you most about this story. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And of course, subscribe to the channel, activate the bell, and stay tuned, because here, we don't just tell stories, we awaken purposes. And the next one could be yours.